Worked for years at our family restaurant until my uncle suddenly accused me of stealing thousands from the business, even though I had proof it was him, and my mother begged me not to say anything because she was afraid he'd go to jail. The night I was accused, I was closing the restaurant down, just like I'd been doing for 5 years. There was still the smell of garlic and onions wafting through the air, and the sound of the pots being put away into the dish racks was almost calming. I had this rhythm, cycling the steps through in my mind: sweep, mop, lock doors, check safe, and it always seemed to soothe me. My uncle was seated in the office, sorting through receipts for the day, as he always did, but this evening there was something odd in his eyes. I didn't know it then. I just assumed he was under pressure or tired. He had been grumbling about bills and suppliers for weeks. I stepped in with the deposit bag and set it down. "All counted," I said with a cheery effort, but was really tired. He looked up and, in this strange, abrupt voice, he said, "Where's the rest of it?" I stood frozen. "The rest of it?" I blinked in confusion. "What do you mean?" I said slowly, trying to keep my cool. His eyebrows furrowed, and suddenly he slammed the day's ledger down on the desk. "Don't act stupid. There are thousands missing. Don't act like you don't know." My heart actually dropped. I felt it hit my stomach and my chest simultaneously. I tried to say something, but my brain just froze. Me? Steal from our family restaurant? I'd been working here since I was 16, literally lived here, and gave it all I had. I've seen my mom and uncle's blood, sweat, and tears go into this shop, and now he's going to accuse me like I'm just some ordinary thief? I had swallowed hard. "I didn't steal anything," I said, voice trembling a little. I hoped that he'd see sense, but he didn't. He sat back in his chair and started to walk around the office, waving at me like I was some kind of movie villain. "Don't deny it. You've been embezzling money for months. I've been keeping an eye on you, and I know you're doing it. Just admit it." There was this anger in his voice, but also this distance, like he wasn't even talking to me as family anymore. I felt like I was shrinking inside my own skin. I wanted to scream, to weep, to hurl something, but I just stood there, but silently. And then I remembered the receipts, the cash ledgers, the back office camera footage, all of it that I had been so meticulously keeping around in case of, well, something like this. I walked over to the little filing cabinet and retrieved them, hands shaking. "Don't you dare!" I attempted to maintain a level tone. "See, the deposits, the logs, everything matches up. I even saved the camera footage from last week. I know where every single dollar went." My uncle snatched the papers from my hand as if I was offering him poison. He flipped quickly through them, eyes darting, and then he just snorted. "This is not proof. You might have made all of this up. I know you." I blinked, couldn't even breathe for a moment. "I faked this?" I whispered, my throat closed. "You think I would go through all this paperwork? Record everything for what? To steal from my own family?" My voice cracked, but he didn't even blink. He just shook his head and muttered something about me not knowing how much he had done for me. And then, he did the thing that made my stomach hit an even lower point. He produced a phone and held up a screenshot of the ringed-in red cash register totals. "This is what you're on the hook for," he said. I saw it, and then, slowly, panic receded and gave way to this strange mix of anger and fear. I knew immediately it wasn't me. I had also tallied it out myself, several times, and it never matched what he was showing. That screenshot. That was not real. Whoever had taken the real numbers and just typed over them. My chest felt tight. "Uncle, that's not right. Look at the logs, look at the cameras," I started, but he cut me off. "No more making excuses. I'm done talking about this. You confess or I call the police." His voice was cold now, stone cold. My mom, who had been standing in silence behind him this whole while, now moved forward. Her eyes were wide and I could see the furrowed brow of fear on her face. "Please," she whispered, don't say anything. Just let it go. Please, for me." My head snapped to hers. "Mom, what are you even saying? I didn't steal anything." She nodded her head, half terrorized, and gripped my arm. I know. Please don't make it worse. I can't. He'll go to jail. I can't handle it." And I just stood there, frozen. Because now it wasn't just a question of demonstrating that I didn't do anything. It was about my mom, scared of what would become of her brother if he fell. She asked me to remain quiet, even though he was accusing me of doing something I hadn't. I could feel the years I'd spent here, the sacrifices, all that I'd put into this restaurant, all of it coiling itself up into this impossibly small ball in my chest. I wanted to scream at him, inform him that he had no right, present him with the evidence, call the police if necessary. But I glanced at my mother, and her face, her desperation, halted me. That night, I came home with a headache, a knot in my stomach, and a feeling of being punched in the stomach. I couldn't sleep. I continued to replay it over and over again in my mind, attempting to justify what had just transpired. My uncle, a man I had trusted, A man I had worked for all these years, accusing me of stealing. My mom begging me to keep quiet, afraid of what would befall me if I did not. And me, stuck in the middle, weighing the desire to establish the truth against shielding my family from destruction. I could not decide which was better. I spent the rest of the days in a haze, going over the logs, the video, counting and recounting everything. And every time I tried showing it to him, he waved me off, shook his head, said I was defending myself too much, or that I couldn't be trusted. It felt like being gaslit by the one person I had grown up loving, the one person I had every weekend and every summer vacation spent with. And the worst thing? My mom folding into herself, scared and quiet, as if she was carrying someone else's sin. And by the end of that first week, I knew something that stung me a little inside. The family, the restaurant, the people I liked. It wasn't so much about honesty or trust anymore. It was a question of control, of fear. And I had to choose. Fight and risk annihilating the family, or keep quiet and live with the shame of an accusation I did not deserve. And yet, even setting this down here, I have no notion which was the correct choice. The next day, I went back to the restaurant with this hard, weighty lump in my chest, as if I were walking into combat, and not the restaurant I had spent my life in. The smell of the fryer was the first thing I met, but it soured my stomach instead of warming me up. I kept thinking about the screenshots, the logs, the camera recordings, all stacked up on my home workspace, goading me with proof that I wasn't the thief. I wished I'd been able to slam them in his face, yell, make him realize what I realized. But each time I thought of my mom's face, her panic, I was paralyzed. The first shift was strained. My uncle barely looked at me, and when he did, it was as if measuring me, waiting for me to make a mistake. Every customer, every order I took in, I felt he was watching my hands, counting my moves, questioning every little thing. I couldn't focus. Fryers burned my fingers turning burgers, and I continued dropping plates, tampering with the cash register. My friends noticed, whispered back and forth, but I couldn't possibly inform them. How was that possible? Even if I did, it would be under the bus. My uncle had already painted me complicit. My mom, she pleaded with me not to tell, so I kept quiet. By day 3, tensions were at a boiling point. I was sweeping the safe, counting cash, rechecking the receipts, and he came running into the back kitchen, slamming his hand on the counter. "You are lying," he yelled. "I can see what's in your eyes at the money. Stop playing games." My coworkers leaped, startled, and I felt this sense of shame and humiliation sweep over me. I wanted to scream at him, to shove him, to tell him he had no right, but I did nothing beyond stand there, fists clenched, heart racing, gasping for air. I went home that night and got out my laptop. I had transferred all of the surveillance footage to show the entire week, just in case. I watched, and I could see myself, working tirelessly, counting money, never having access to more than I was given. Then, in the back office video, I saw it, the moment it registered. My uncle had been sneaking into the safe when I was not present, taking small amounts of cash, just enough to make it appear to be missing gradually. My stomach twisted. I was angry, betrayed, and afraid. If I went there now, heaven knows what would have become of it. But if I said nothing, it was like letting a ghost get away with something I'd worked for my entire life. I tried talking to my mom again. I showed her the video, hoping for some sense of comfort, some shared sense of, "Alright, we know what's going on now." But her reaction was not what I expected. She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes, and whispered, "I can't. If he goes to jail, the restaurant dies. Our family dies. Please, just let it be." And I just stood there, heart shattering in slow motion. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about the restaurant, the family, all the things she had fought for. But saying nothing felt like I was letting him get away with destroying me, too. For a week, I overthought this to and fro in my head, reliving all the arguments, all the lists, all the clips from the cameras. My uncle would make a comment, my mom would beg me to just shut up, and I'd be flailing in the middle, like I was drowning on all the rage, all the fear, all the anger. I started losing sleep, turning and thrashing, thinking of what he'd say next, what he'd do. Every time I went into the restaurant, my hands quivered a little, as though I were walking a tightrope across a void. And then the breaking point came. It happened on a Saturday lunchtime, the busiest hour of the week, when the restaurant was thronged and seconds were precious. My uncle came bursting into the kitchen, face flushed, bellowing at one of the waiters for doing some minor mistake. We were all standing there, frozen, and I could see the fear in their eyes. That was when I realized that I could no longer remain quiet, not if he was hurting the rest of us with his anger, his control. I wanted to react, to stand up, but then my mother appeared in the doorway, shaking her head, and I remained frozen again. Her eyes pleaded. She mouthed to me, "Not now," and I just bit my tongue, swallowed my words, and headed back to the fryer, this mix of guilt and anger filling me up. Later, once the lunch rush had subsided, I snuck into the office when my uncle stepped out for a delivery. I scrolled through the security footage and started taking screenshots, timestamps, the exact moments that he had taken money from the safe. My hands shook, drops of perspiration appearing on my forehead. I knew this could ruin everything, but I knew it was the best way that I could show that I wasn't a liar. And for the first time in days, I was thinking with some sort of clarity, like I had something genuine in a crazed world. I tried to sleep that night again, but it was impossible. I kept imagining him bursting into my bedroom, yelling, blaming, threatening. I kept imagining my mom crying, shaking, caught in the middle. And yet I also kept imagining that moment when I could finally expose the truth. The look on his face when the lies fell apart, and maybe, just maybe, feeling a little vindication. And then I caught myself. If I did it then, it would destroy everything, the family, the restaurant, our lives. So I just lay there, looking at the ceiling, hoping that somehow there was a way to make it all right without anyone being hurt, without anyone I care about having to be lost. I thought back over all the years I spent here, the weekends I sacrificed, the nights I waited late to close up, the hours and hours of counting change and piling dishes. All the sacrifice, all the hard work, was somehow warped. It had all been for this. All this accusation, all this fear, all this impossible choice between truth and family. And I realized, maybe for the first time, that love of family is not necessarily always about justice or fairness. That sometimes it is about survival. But even knowing that, I couldn't help but feel the rage. I couldn't help but feel betrayed. I couldn't help but consider the ways in which he'd used my mom's fear as a tool, the ways in which he'd stereotyped me as a criminal for his own gain. And each time I did consider it, part of me hardened, like armor around my heart. I knew I had to be careful, wait until the moment was right, gather all I could. But I knew I couldn't simply remain in this jail of fear and silence forever. And that was when I started creating a plan, not to get him arrested, not yet, but to rescue myself, to say the truth, to make sure that no matter what happened, the story could not be changed. I backed everything up, named files, took notes, all in detail recursively. I obsessed over it, spent nights in my bedroom, reliving numbers, reviewing footage, trying to get my head around it all. And in a warped, perverse way, it gave me a sense of control over a situation that felt utterly beyond my control that I had yet to go up against him. I had still not told my mom that I had all the proof, even though I wanted to. Undefined it was this tightrope walking daily, staying in balance between exposing him and keeping the fragile family peace. And some nights, in bed, I would just stare at the ceiling, feeling the weight of it all descending upon me, and question whether families are designed to get through these kinds of betrayals, or if they're just meant to carry the scars for life. It all erupted its top one Thursday evening. I'd served the dinner shift alone, and the restaurant had been slow for a change. I'd the ledger out, balancing cash against receipts, watching the camera tapes again, just to make sure I wasn't missing anything. And then my uncle appeared, late, slamming the door after him like he owned the place, which technically he did. But this time, there was something in his eyes, a mixture of frustration and suspicion that made my stomach tie itself up immediately. I tried to keep my focus on the ledger, flipping pages, as if I wasn't watching him. "You're avoiding me," he said low and hard. He leaned against the counter, looking at me. "You've been acting strange." My mouth went dry. I wanted to say, "I'm not acting strange. You're accusing me of stealing." But all I did was continue writing numbers, hoping he'd leave me alone, hoping I could make it through one more day without losing it. He didn't. He kept pacing, muttering, and I could sense the electric sparks building up my spine. And then he simply stopped and leaned in close. "You know," he breathed almost, "I could call the cops right now. Just say the word, and it's over." My hand shook on the pen. You can't," I breathed. "You have no proof." He cut me off with a burst of laughter, as if he found me pathetic. "No proof? Oh, I have all the proof I need. You've been lying to me. I've been watching you. And those tiny spreadsheets? Alibis. You think I don't see the way you handle the money?" My heart started racing, beating so loud I could hear it in my ears. And that's when I lost control. I slammed the ledger shut, stood up, shaking hands, constricted chest. "Stop. Just stop. I've worked here 5 years. 5 years. I'm counting every penny, every evening. I'm watching everything. I've got the cameras, the tickets, everything." I tossed my arms up in frustration and exhaustion. "It's you. You're taking money. I have the tape. I have the proof. You're lying. You've been lying all along." He glared at me, and I saw the look of shock on his face, as if I was the crazy one. And then, for a moment, the anger softened. Or maybe it was shock. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, looking at me, and my chest burned with hope and fear. My mom entered the room, silent, trembling, and I watched as her panic contagious. She mouthed, "Please don't," but it was already too late. I had to talk now. I pulled out my laptop, trembling so violently that I feared I would drop it. I opened the folders, handed him the surveillance clips, the time-stamped screenshots, all the seconds he had withdrawn cash from the safe. I watched his face change, from shock to incredulity, and more gradually, this mixture of guilt and rage. Wait, that can't, he started, but I stopped him. See it, every night, every shift, it's all here. You've been stealing from the restaurant, from my family, and then you fault me. My words cracked, and tears welled up at the edges of my eyes. Do you know what that's like? To have someone you trust accuse you of something you didn't do, and to have your mom tell you to keep this quiet? I saw him step back, but the tension didn't release. My mom came up shaking. Enough, she whispered. We need to be so careful about this. If this gets out, if it blows, the restaurant could, our family, everything. Her words trailed off and I felt the weight of the decision again. Justice or family, truth or living. I could see the conflict within her eyes. She loved me, she trusted me, but she was more scared of the repercussions than she was of the lie. My uncle finally opened his mouth, his voice low, nearly hollow. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was trying to. He trailed off, looking down at the floor. The words hung there, unspoken, weighty. I didn't know if he was apologizing or trying to justify everything that he had done. My hands continued to shake, chest tightened, but I felt that strange mix of relief and anger. Relief that the truth was finally out, anger that it had taken me losing my mind to get there. We sat there, tight-lipped and rigid, for what felt like hours. My mother grabbed my hand, holding it, trying to steady me, trying to keep the family from disintegrating entirely. I watched my uncle wrestling with himself, maybe realizing what he had done, maybe knowing what was going to happen next. I did not know what to do. Part of me wanted to call the police, to get him in trouble, but another part, the part that loved my mom and wanted to keep the family together, held me back. We did not call the police. Yet. We did not shout, did not rage. We just sat in that office in silence, each of us grappling with our own guilt, fear, and shame. I knew then that often, the truth is not enough. Oftentimes, despite having everything testified against them, the right thing to do is not immediately clear. And sometimes, love is not justice, it is survival. That night, I went home exhausted, depleted, but somehow, lighter. The lie had been exposed, if nothing had yet been done about it. I could finally breathe easy, knowing I hadn't stolen a penny, that the truth was mine waiting. And for the first time in a week, I didn't feel as if I was walking on a knife blade. I could feel my mom's relief too, small as it was, and that meant something. But the scars were still there. The betrayal, the fear, the months of not knowing and shame, it didn't go away overnight. I knew that trust had been broken, and even though I was fighting for the truth, healing would come slowly. And maybe that was the hardest of all, knowing that revealing the truth doesn't heal everything. Sometimes, it just cleans things up, and clarity is both a blessing and a curse. I sat and observed the following days quietly, making sure nothing else went missing, making sure my mom was alright, keeping close tabs on my uncle. There was tension every day, but the ever-present dread of suspicion had disappeared, only to be replaced with a simmering wariness. I had no idea what the future would bring, if the restaurant would last, if my family would stay together. But I did know one thing. I hadn't let him destroy me. I hadn't let him get the best of me. And somewhere in that quiet, in the restaurant's back room after dark, when the smell of onion rings still clung and the lamps were low, I knew something. Life doesn't always reduce to right or wrong, to justice or revenge. Sometimes it's about living, about fighting for the people you love, about keeping your own conscience intact when the world tries to accuse you of something that you're not. And that night, in the stillness of the restaurant, I finally felt that I lived. Not just the accusation, but the betrayal, the fear, and the heartless choice between truth and kin. The subsequent days seemed like a dream. I just kept showing up to work, on autopilot. But everything was different. The charge still hung in the air like smoke, heavy and invisible, brushing against all of us, leaving us with impressions of tension. My uncle wasn't speaking as much anymore. He kept his head down, busy with paperwork, deliveries, inventory, anything to keep himself distracted. My mother tried to be normal, but I witnessed the way she flinched whenever I stepped into the room, the way she sprang at every loud outburst he hurled, even when it was not addressed to her. And I was a specter in my own life, floating through the restaurant I had spent my years in, watching the fissures widen around me. I kept the video and the receipts at home. I didn't flaunt them, didn't blackmail or threaten. Part of me wanted to. Part of me wanted to just blow everything wide open and let everyone see what had happened. But the other half, the half that cared for my mom and did not want to lose the restaurant, stopped me. I realized then that sometimes evidence fails to heal relationships. And sometimes it just redistributes the load, makes things a bit quieter, a bit colder, but doesn't heal the wound. It was a slow thing, This living with someone who had charged you with all you weren't. I started noticing the little things. How my uncle would clear out before I did. How he'd pause before he talked to me. How his words, even when harmless, contained that residual roughness. And I started noticing the price paid by my mother. Waking up in the middle of the night, creases of concern etched on her face, whispering apologies that were not hers to make. I would have yelled at them both, cried, laughed, done anything to break the tension, but I held myself back, for I had learned, sometimes survival is endurance, however it burns within you. I kept showing up every day, working harder than I ever had before, following every dollar, writing scrupulous notes. Part of me wanted to show him that I couldn't be hurt, that his manipulation and dishonesty wouldn't be able to shake me. Part of me just wanted to disappear, take a walk outside and never come back. Because the betrayal was new and crushing and I wasn't sure I could find enough strength to hold it together forever. But I stayed. I stayed because I loved the restaurant, because I loved my mom, because amidst all the lies there was life that we shared and going away would be giving him the win. Months passed, and tension ceased, a little bit. My uncle never apologized. Not fully, not the way that would have made everything whole. But his accusations softened, became uncertain. He still wouldn't talk straight, still kept his distance. My mom did get a little better, sleeping a little better. Her eyes no longer haunted. And me, well, I learned something about strength, about boundaries, about holding evidence and strength without using it to destroy. I realized that justice is not necessarily combative at times. Sometimes, it is simply recognizing the truth, keeping it to yourself, and letting it speak for itself even when the world around you is mad. There were still hateful times, yes, times when I would look at him and burn up with the same flame within me. But I learned how to breathe around them. How to keep reminding myself that learning everything wouldn't heal my mom's phobia or the lingering distrust. I did what I could control. My job, my integrity. The small victories of each day when the books balanced, when the customers were happy, when the restaurant whirred along. These were my armor, my excuse to myself that in a broken situation, I could still do what was right even if the world around me was messy. And then one evening, after closing, my mom and I stayed behind to wipe down the counters, sweep the floors, turn off the lights one at a time. We didn't talk. There was no dramatic apology, no weeping reconciliation, only the quiet realization that sometimes survival is not about words, it's about presence, about solidity. I looked around at the tables, the smell of fried onions in the air, the soft hum of the refrigerators. I knew that in the midst of it all, the restaurant remained ours, remained alive, still a place where hard work, concern, and integrity mattered above accusations and lies. My uncle came in to pick up some forms, eyed us, and for the first time in months, I felt like we occupied the same space without impending tension. He didn't say anything, didn't accuse, but merely nodded and departed. It wasn't a truce, per se, but something. And I clung to that something, no matter how little, as a lifeline. I knew family was not always perfect. At times it was broken, at times painful, at times unfairly accusatory. But to survive it, cling to your integrity, and love anyway. That is where the strength lies. That night, walking home, I could feel the weight of the last few months lift a little. The anger was still there, sure, and the betrayal would always leave its mark, but I had compassion. I had truth. And I had my mom, who despite everything, had opened her arms and explained to me why love sometimes takes the form of silence, patience, and perseverance. I understood where she was coming from, even if I wished she hadn't asked me to be quiet. I understood that life isn't about swift justice. Sometimes it's about surviving peace, even if it's imperfect and tenuous. Afterwards, sitting in my room, I finally allowed myself to breathe deeply, to let the tension drain out of my shoulders. I realized that holding the truth within, protecting the people I loved, and protecting my own honor, that was victory. Not the dramatic confrontation, not the apologies or the arrests, but the quiet determination, the pure commitment to be loving and truthful in the face of betrayal. And for the first time in so long, I had the feeling that maybe the worst was behind us, and maybe, just maybe, we could go on without the past destroying everything. I think about it a lot, even now, about the sleepless nights, those times when I wanted to scream, the fear that ate at my breastbone. But I also consider what I learned, that truth does not necessarily have to be screamed, that courage sometimes is being strong in silence, that family can cause terrible pain, and yet still be worth fighting for. And most of all, I know that you can overcome betrayal, even that from the one you love the most, and it will show you patience, resilience, and the soft power of understanding your own heart. Every now and then, at night when the restaurant is closed and I am closing down, I stand in the doorway, take a breath, and simply look around. The smell of onions and bread and fryers, the faint hum of the lights, the worn tables and chairs, it's all still here. Undefined, and so am I. Undefined, we're still here. Undefined, imperfect, hurt, cautious, but alive, undefined, and for now, that's enough.